Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Fights in Football Friday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you all very much for tuning in today. It's been a morning for your boy here. It's little chaotic around these parts today. Midway through trivia last night, I started getting like these chills or whatever, and just kind of started feeling not great. Finished it because we grind here, and then basically sick on the couch all night. Slept, feel a little bit better. Took a bunch of medicine, felt better still, and then came in here. I was like, okay, you know what? It's Friday. We're gonna I love these are my favorite shows to do. We're gonna power through this thing. Go to turn my laptop on, not turning on. Everything's plugged in. Everything's the same. Everything is completely normal. My laptop started working. It is as I'm recording this. For those of you watching or listening after, as I'm recording this, it is 10 after 10 here on a Friday. My laptop started working at 9:58. I had the PlayStation in the other room, geared up and ready to go. Like, okay, I guess we're doing the stream on the PlayStation today. And then I came in here, let's just try one more time. And then it turned on. This show is not as well prepped as I would like it to be, if I'm being completely honest with you. This is a little bit more shooting from the hip today, but it's still going to be a whole lot of fun as we get ready for Week 5 in the NFL, because we are already at Week 5 in the NFL. We are already in Week 18 in the Canadian Football League, and then we got some UFC and some WWE previewing to do, so it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. Okay, so let's get into the NFL preview for the week. I do not have my notes for how we did last week. I do not believe it was very well, but we will power on through. So here we go. It is I guess I should write these down somewhere here. Hang on, let's just using my notebook as a mic stand. It is early morning football over in England, Tottenham Stadium, I believe, as the New York Jets take on Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are 2.5-point favorites with the total at 40.5. I have said the biggest, one of the big rules I have is let's avoid the London games. But holy hell are they tempting me, because I don't know how you can watch what the Jets have done in the first few weeks and say, oh no, this team is only 3 points worse than the Minnesota Vikings. They got this. Everything's going to be fine. Totally not an issue at all. Don't even need to worry about it. Vikings have, the Jets have got this one. I don't believe that. I think the Vikings are a better coached football team, and I don't want to overreact too much, because I think a lot of overreacting happened after Thursday Night Football with when the Jets kicked the shit out of the Patriots. That was Mayo's first time running a short week like that, and it was a team that really just didn't look prepared, and the Jets went in and just whooped them. Aside from that, the Jets haven't looked all that good. But you also don't want to overreact to last week when they lost to Denver. And I explained on Monday how this was a game that was very frustrating because, it's the elements. It's like, okay, well, you have Aaron Rodgers. He's played in minus $1 billion a bunch. He's playing Bo Nix. Who's Bo Nix? Why is the weather the problem for you guys? So I don't want to overreact too much to that, but it seems like everyone is trying really hard to not overreact to the Vikings now, and I think to see where both teams are at through 4 weeks, and to suggest that the Vikings at a neutral site are only 2.5 points better than the Jets, come on. So we are going to go Vikings in this spot. We're going to go Vikings minus 2.5 for this one, for a pick. And also, again, none of this is gambling advice. This is just my pick for each one, because for every NFL game this year after week 1, we go through and make a pick per game. And that's kind of the old gimmick here. And that's how we do it. And so that is that. I don't have lines for player props or anything like that, but we are going to take a look at a Wilson prop in this. And as we kind of transition into the fantasy football talk for this game, when you look at the New York Jets, Garrett Wilson has to get going in this game. And last week it was, okay, well, Surtan's on him. You kind of still have to start him. This week, the Vikings have done a good job of taking away number one receivers, but it has been a bit more of a team effort. And so I think that Garrett Wilson, this is the one where he needs to be good. And this is the one where if he's not, you get a little bit concerned about that, because it just seems like everything else with Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of clicking a little bit. But that one, you get a little bit worried. And then they go off Buffalo, which maybe isn't the defense we thought they were. And then they face the Steelers coming up in week 7. So there's going to be a little bit more focus here on Garrett Wilson. This is the one where he needs to get right. And so because of that, I think deeper leagues you can go Alan Lazard. I think you can feel comfortable-ish with that. That is a bit more of a desperation type of a move. Breece Hall, I think you still play him. But I do think that Braylon Allen is certainly worthy of a look as well. And if you're desperate, Ty Conklin, you could do worse than him at the tight end spot. For the Vikings, you're starting your guys, right? I don't think I would go Sam Darnold this week. I think I would try to find something else at quarterback. Aaron Jones, absolutely. And we saw Addison is a impactful part of this roster as well, so him and Jefferson, I think you can roll with that. Also, just a speculative ad, I think you can go out and look for a TJ Hawkinson now for the Vikings. I think we are getting to a point where it sounds like it might actually be a little bit close. And as I go through, also, I said on the show the other day, oh, hey, the Vampire League, I'm feeling good. Gino had a better than expected day yesterday. And I didn't. Bucky Irving did not break through in the way that I would hope in a 36-30 game on Thursday Night Football. So we're a little bit behind in that one. But I do think that TJ Hawkinson is an interesting speculative ad for some teams now, as the tight end spot has been just abject disaster this season. And this is, Mike Evans. Hey, there you go. But the tight end spot has absolutely been just a profound disaster. And I think TJ Hawkinson, A, is talented, and B, is part of a pretty good offense and a pretty good situation. So I do think that you can look at that and feel all right about kind of how things are going when he comes back. Anyway, and yeah, no kidding, Toxic. 20 points. Oh, yeah, no, that's all. That's all Mike Evans. Yeah, a couple receiving touchdowns, 5 receptions for 62 yards. Yeah, no, that'll do it. A good start against the silver bullet that is Eric this week. So that one should be an intense matchup, but Mike Evans helping you out there. All right, let's move on. Dolphins taking on the New England Patriots. Patriots are favored by a point. Holy crap. The total in this game is 36.5. All right. I don't think there's a whole lot to analyze in this game. The Patriots suck. The Dolphins are quite bad. I don't know if I can get to a point where I would have the Dolphins below New England. I get this game is at Foxborough, and I get it has been dreadful for Miami so far. But they just they have too many players to be worse than New England, don't they? I guess they did just lose to Tennessee, but maybe Tennessee's better than we thought they were going to be, right? Or maybe not. I think Tennessee's better than their record would indicate. Anyway, let's just say it that way. So the call in this game is Miami and New England under 36.5. No way do I think any points are being scored in this game at all. From a fantasy standpoint, boy, you don't want to use anyone. For New England, you got to keep rolling with Ramondre. You got to hope that at some point he got just what are the chances he fumbles every game? That at some point that's going to stop, right? But he's a talented running back. I think you go with him. But you do keep an eye with Antonio Gibson. In deep leagues, I think he might have a bit of value there. But aside from that, I don't think you're starting anyone. And on the Miami side, it's tough. You have, what, are you going to sit Tyreek Hill? You're not, right? You're not going to do that. Jalen Waddle, kind of the same. I am in a spot where I kind of have to start Mostert this week if he is healthy, given bye weeks and stuff like that. And so I think the running back, so you're kind of you are understanding that this is, I just picked under 36.5. So we are hoping that whatever Miami player you are starting, you hope that is the one that trips and falls into the end zone. But this is an ugly game. Speaking of, off to Chicago we go. It's the Bears taking on the Carolina Panthers. Bears are favored by 4 at home, with the point total sitting at 40.5. And this is one I have tried to fight believing in the Chicago Bears because of how bad this offense is, but I do think that this is a game that this defense wins. I think they go out and just obliterate that offensive line for the Carolina Panthers, and that pass rush for Chicago is legit, and that is going to be an issue, I think, for Carolina. I just don't think that they have the offensive line to hold up to this defense. And so I think this will be a bit of a come down for Carolina. So we are going to go with Chicago. We are going to take them -4. Carolina's defense, like in this whole thing, this resurgence that they have had under Andy Dalton, where they have surged to one win. You look at it, they have back-to-back games. They gave up 34 points to the Bengals and 22 to the Raiders, which is like giving up 34 points to anyone else. So I think that this defense maybe is still not good. And while I do not think that means Chicago lights the world on fire, I do think that this is going to be probably another low-scoring game. So we are also going to go under. Sorry, I know the camera's shaking on these. I could just go back and re-listen after, but who wants to do that, right? 40.5 is the total. We're going to go under that one as well. But Chicago -4 is definitely one that has our interest this week, shall we say. From a fantasy football standpoint, I think I made it pretty clear. I'm not super trusting a lot of my Panthers this week. I'm definitely not going with Andy Dalton. Deontay Johnson, he has certainly found a role in this offense, and I think that as a flex option, you can still start him this week. Xavier Legette, I liked him last week. I like him as a player just in general. I would try to not this week if I were you and see if you can get a better option out there. With the running backs, Chuba is getting his and he's continuing to make it work. I think you kind of just keep rolling with him and you're basically hoping that he gets the touchdown, right? On the Chicago side, definitely not Caleb Williams. That one is need to see a few good games out of that. But I think you can start the pass catchers. I think you can feel comfortable with the healthy pass catchers for Chicago. You can roll out with that. DeAndre Swift, he has a big game, but I'm not loving it. But I do think you can trust it a little bit here against Carolina. And for deep leagues, I do think Roschon Johnson getting some goal line work is legitimate. So there's actually a decent amount of fantasy options from this game. The Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The total is at 45.5. Jacksonville favored by 3 points. The Jags are now 0-4 after a close loss last week against the Houston Texans, while the Indianapolis Colts coming off of a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are we looking at for Anthony Richardson? Injury status right now. Questionable with an oblique. Okay. This is going to be, I think, a probably year-long thing with the Indianapolis Colts in the not trusting of Anthony Richardson and not knowing what you are going to get out of this player on a week-in, week-out basis now, given the injury. And it sounds like it's just kind of a pain tolerance thing at this point, which is not fun to deal with. Certainly, when you're trying to get a kid experience when he's only played like 20 football games in the last 3 years. So it's a tricky spot. That This is a absolute stay away for me. I want no part of this game at all. Jacksonville, it should be better. It's not getting better. And I have some, very big concerns about this one. So 45.5 seems kind of high for these two teams, given the potential struggles on offense for Anthony Richardson. I will say, though, I think that a little bit of the narrative is getting just the slightest bit overblown. Well, Joe Flacco came in and led the team to victory. Yes, he did. I will say, though, Richardson was looking good in the first parts of those games. They were starting to complete the ball downfield and actually moving it a little bit. And so that did help. So he was looking good. But there's just too many question marks on either side of this game for me to assume that this is going to be a high-scoring game. And it pains me that 45.5 is a high-scoring game, but I'm going to go under 45.5 there. The Houston Texans are at home against the Bills of Buffalo. The Texans favored by 1. This is certainly the game of the early slate as the Houston Texans try to get things figured out, and Buffalo kind of gets deflated a little bit and brought back down to earth after getting just whooped on by the Baltimore Ravens last week. And I think that was a really good indicator of maybe we were taking things a little bit too serious. Toxic's making moves. Toxic's picking up people while we just did a Colts breakdown. Also, I forgot to give fantasy advice, but one of the things I would say is keep an eye on Trey Sermon. And Toxic just comes in. Boom. Trey Sermon. Mine. Loading up from a fantasy standpoint in the Vampire League. So making moves. Toxic. We'll get back to the fantasy breakdown of that game in a minute. Apologies. I missed that one. But, yeah, Buffalo, I think this was a reminder that, yes, things have gone very well. And I had said, like, they were playing the best football in the NFL going into Sunday night against the Baltimore Ravens. It was a nice reminder that they were playing the best football against Jacksonville, who has a lot of shit they need to get figured out. Miami, who ditto, and Arizona, who sure do try really hard, but maybe have a few holes in their game. And so maybe we shouldn't have taken Buffalo as seriously as we did. And I think that comes around in this one as well. I think this is going to be a game where they have real trouble stopping the Houston Texans. I think this is going to be one that is going to be a real high-scoring game. And so I think that this is going to be over that 47.5. And I do think that it'll be the Texans covering this one. I think Houston kind of comes back down to earth. Or I think Buffalo continues to kind of come back down to earth and kind of settles in as a good, not great team. Hey, Deeds, how's it going? Thanks for popping into the chat again today. I appreciate it. From a fantasy standpoint, talk suck. From a fantasy standpoint, sorry, I always struggle because I am not the advanced streamer that I should be, and I don't have the chats on the side. Like, we have it just in the thing. But I put all these up on YouTube after. And so I'm reacting to things that are going on in the chat. And the people who watch these on YouTube don't have a fucking clue what's going on. So apologies for those watching after. Maybe I'll try to get that rectified here in a little bit. But from a fantasy standpoint, I kind of think you're starting everybody. I just took over 47.5. So Khalil Shakir on Buffalo is someone I think you can trust. James Cook, I think they should trust him more, but I think you can roll with that. And from a Texans standpoint, sounds like Tank Dell is back. Roll with him. Tell me Diggs isn't going to have a big week. And Nico Collins is making a very strong case for being like a number 1 overall pick next year. Obviously, we're starting the quarterbacks here. Keep an eye on Joe Mixon. What are we looking at here for Mixon's health? I just told you to start Khalil Shakir. He's out this week. Apologies. So don't start him. But I do think that is a... Well, let's go through the rest of the thing here. Before... I think that opens... I really do think that... why am I blanking on the name now? Keon Coleman, right? That's him. I do think that is a player that the Bills, I think, are just kind of scratching the surface on here a little bit. And they are he is a player that I think that they can kind of roll with a little bit more. It's funny, I was listening to Bet the Board, and they were talking about how, like, all the guys who were there before, the Cook... Shakir, I guess they drafted Coleman, but Kincaid, all those guys are doing well. But the guys who they brought in, the MVS, the Curtis Samuel, all that, none of those guys are really clicking in the way that they need them to. But no, I think Coleman has a pretty good game here this week, and that would be one that I certainly would be looking at in fantasy football as someone who I think can step up, because I think Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs on that other sideline, given how we all perceive that whole breakup went, I think that's going to be one that there's going to be a little bit of fuck you going on in that particular matchup. But I am here on the injury part because I wanted to see Joe Mixon. Boy, they got a lot of guys hurt right now. Is Mixon not even on the injury report for the Texans? Are we that much of a good to go? Or am I just missing this? All right, so I think Joe Mixon's good to go in this game. If he is, that is 100% a go. Joe Mixon is not Derrick Henry, but Joe Mixon is also not a very good running back. So I think that this is going to be a... oh, shit. Well, now here at Fantasy Footballers, Joe Mixon not expected to suit up. Not expected to play Week 5. Okay, apologies. I'm looking at I don't know why he's not on this injury report thing that I'm looking at, or if I'm just blowing past him. That does change it a little bit, and honestly, now that we've kind of, gone over that, I'm going to change it. I am going to go Buffalo +1. Okay, see? Toxic knows. Trey Sermon in place of Joe Mixon. That's actually a really good call. This is showing how close this game is. I've scratched this out 2 times now. I'm sticking with Houston -1 as my pick for this game. Cam Akers just hasn't really shown that explosiveness, and I do think that this Houston team does rely on the run, probably too much, but That is an aspect of their game that is going to be, I think, severely lacking. I think if you are kind of desperate or if you need like a real cheap DFS play, I think Cam Akers is actually a sneaky good play for you this week. Okay, so in-depth injury analysis there for sure. I did miss the fantasy breakdown on Colts Jaguars. Toxic has already picked up Trey Sermon. I think that's a good call. He looked good. Like in the runs that he was getting in place of Jonathan Taylor last week, that there looked like there was some explosion there, and so I think monitor the injury report with everything with like do a better job of it than I did with Jonathan Taylor and everything like that. But I do think that you can, Taylor is questionable right now with that ankle injury, but we'll see. If nothing else, I think there's going to be a little bit of a split. But aside from that. Like, I think you can trust Pittman. It's so tough to trust anyone else in Indianapolis right now, so that's probably all I would do. On the Jacksonville side, Brian Thomas is legit. You roll with him every week. ETN, just based on where you drafted him and the fact that we're into buys now, you probably have to. But Tank Bigsby continues to be a really good speculative ad. Bigsby should be owned in almost every league because of the opportunity that could be there. And I do think that this would be a game that I would start Trevor Lawrence in. I can't trust Anthony Richardson until we see it for a week at least. There. So that is the fantasy breakdown for a game we talked about a little bit earlier. The Cincinnati Bengals are at home against the Baltimore Ravens. The total is 49.5. Baltimore coming in as a 2.5 point favorite. A lot of people that I have heard, a lot of smart people who I listen to are on the Bengals this week. And I can't get there with this group. I think defensively that there have been just too many holes for this team to really overcome. They get a good win last week against Carolina, but they couldn't stop anything against Washington, which we're seeing. That's not the worst thing, but I don't buy into this defense being able to stop Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, we had a big thing last week, and this is going to come up in the next game too, but we had a big thing last year where every week a team would have a big, like, seismic change their spots in the power rankings win. And then the next week they come out and shit the bed. And so I am a little bit worried about that from a Baltimore Ravens standpoint. But coming up after this for Baltimore, they have the Giants and the Browns. So I don't think we have to worry about a look-ahead spot or anything like that. I think they're going to be really focused on this game. This is a huge one for them. And when you look at the Bengals, their offense so far this season has done well against Carolina and Washington. Like, I'm not buying that this offense is all figured out. The Chiefs did a pretty good job of limiting them, and obviously New England kind of just took their lunch money in week one. Now, Baltimore, the defense does have some holes. That is legitimate. But I do think that this offense, they are figuring out what they have in Derrick Henry, and they are figuring out how to kind of utilize everyone here. And so I think that is I think it's a really good football team over in Baltimore. And so I am going against all of the smart people and going with Baltimore minus 2.5 for this one. Washington taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Commanders are favored by 3.5 points with the total at 43.5. Sorry, we'll get to that in a second. Fantasy football. Can you tell I've done this for a decade? Fantasy football for the Bengals and the Ravens. Joe Burrow both quarterbacks have been drafted in spots where I think you kind of have to every week, right? Lamar, I think, has a good matchup this week. On the Bengals side, like, you're starting Chase. Higgins is becoming maybe a bit more of a factor in these things. And so I think that there is an option there to maybe take advantage of. From a running back standpoint, Chase Brown continues to look good, and I think he's going to continue to get a little bit of the work, but I think Zach Moss is probably going to get more of it. So Brown is a bit more of a if you're desperate on a buy sort of a situation, while Moss is the more stable option in that backfield, which I think says a lot. Also, people are going to be pissed about Mike Gesicki from last week. I think there's an opportunity here. We have seen where you beat Baltimore is over the middle of the field, and I think that Gesicki has a real chance to pick up a lot of, like, kind of, I think he's going to be a PPR beast this week. I think he does have a really good week. So he would be one that I would kind of target in DFS maybe. From a Baltimore standpoint, Zay Flowers is quite good, and so I think you trust him. Obviously, Derrick Henry. This one feels like it's going to be a bit of a closer game, and so I do think that there's going to be a bit more Justice Hill involved. So I think for deep leagues, I think that I think that you can roll with that. Deeds, fuck running backs. Both my RBs are currently questionable. Yeah. Yeah, that's a thing. I'm in a lot of leagues, but I'm in one where I have either everyone on bye or hurt this week, and I got two guys in my lineup. One's questionable, and it looks like they're probably going to go, but the other is Taysom Hill, and he's questionable with fractured ribs, I think it is. And that doesn't seem like fun. So that's Oh, and it's the Monday Nighter too. So I don't want to drop anyone on my bench. We already had to drop someone who I didn't want to drop anyway. Also, I discovered yesterday, that league doesn't have an IR spot. So, for commissioners out there, IR spots. I put 4 in the Vampire League. So, I thought that would help me because I could stash people, but then everyone else realized there was 4 IR spots and they're stashing their people. So, that's been a little annoying. But I like IR spots are fine. And the fact that we didn't have any, and I have Rashee Rice. And they're saying, oh, well, it could be 4 weeks. Like, can y'all fuck off with that, please? But still, that was just a mini rant. So yeah, no, it's tough out there. Deeds, for sure. Oh yeah, London. That was a thing, hey? But back to this game. Bengals and Ravens. I do think for the Deedses of the world, who both running backs are questionable right now. Honestly, I think Justice Hill isn't the worst play. I think he's going to get a lot of looks out of that backfield in a pass catching role, and I think that's going to be this is going to be a close game. I think all the way down, and so I think 2-minute drills. Oh, Baltimore, all of a sudden, they're down by 3. We need to pass the ball. In comes Justice Hill for a full drive, and they really start to utilize things. The Mark Andrews one, if you can't trust him anymore, I understand that entirely. I do still think, given how tight end is, you kind of have to roll with him, but I can fully understand not at this point. Okay, Browns against Washington. It is the Commanders, favored by 3.5 points with a total of 43.5. For Washington, they are obviously the darlings right now, coming off of a couple of very explosive games. They are 3-1. They are the talk of the NFL, and they are kicking the shit out of people. Their offense so far in the 4 games this season has scored 20 points. 21 points, but then in the last couple of weeks, 38 and 42. Going up against a Cleveland Browns defense that I still think is good but not great. This entire, handicap or prediction or whatever is solely based on nothing I have seen on the football field. It is just, quite frankly, things are going too good in Washington right now. And so I do think that this is just a little bit of the air getting let out. And what we talked about in the Baltimore game, where last year, teams that had this big, this is their biggest win of the year, kind of came back and laid an egg in their next matchup. And so that's, again, it's all anecdotal. It's all a trendy thing. It's not actual on-the-field analysis. I just have this feeling that we're all too much on Washington right now. And look, if they come out and kick the shit out of Cleveland, then I will change my tune. And look, this could be a team that makes the playoffs, right? And we kind of even said in the preseason, in the previews, look, this is a team that I kind of want to get to the playoffs, but I just can't get there with this defense. Now, the Browns are not a team that's going to take advantage of that, but I do think that this is an all-right defensive team that will have a better understanding of how to defend against Washington than other teams have. So I am going to, this is the furthest thing from something I'm going to click on this week. This is just a feel. I'm going to go Cleveland plus 3.5. You lose by a field goal and you still win this one for Cleveland. The Raiders taking on the Denver Broncos. The total's at 35.5. Oh, sorry, fantasy. God damn it. Fantasy football advice. I can't imagine sitting someone against Washington's defense. So Amari Cooper, can we get Amari Cooper out of Cleveland? Can we do that? What a career this guy has had. With the Raiders, when they're awful. I don't know why I had to specify that. It's the Raiders. They've always been awful. They're my favorite team. I can say that. It goes to Dallas for a little bit, and it's fun. And then he gets moved to Cleveland, and now it's dog shit again. Let's get this guy. Can the Chiefs trade for Amari Cooper, please? Can they just do that? That would be so much fun to have that guy there. Can we just get him out of Cleveland? Because he is, I think, a stud. And I think you have to roll with that. And I think Jerry Jeudy, you can roll with him as well. Running back, Jerome Ford. Yep. trusting it. On the Washington side, like, who are you sitting right now because of how good this team is? I know I just went through that whole thing of, well, maybe Cleveland's defense limits and blah, 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 blah. You're still... There's no way I'm telling you to sit Jaden Daniels on the run that he is on. With the running backs, Brian Robinson, Eckler got banged up, and McNichols actually looked really interesting in that backfield. So that's, I'm not saying start him or either of those guys. I think Robinson is kind of the only one that you can go with. I know he's questionable with a knee. I do think he'll be fine, but I mean, keep an eye on that situation because McNichols is, I think really talented and really quite good. And McLaurin, I think you can trust as well. So that's basically start everyone is one. Even the tight end, Ertz, right? Yeah, start Zach Ertz this week. Raiders taking on the Denver Broncos. Totals at 35.5. That's disgusting. And the spread is Denver -2.5. There's a lot going on in Vegas right now with the whole Devontae Adams thing. Also, if Cleveland could get out of their own way, I think they kind of kicked the shit out of the Raiders last week. Amari Cooper had an 80 to 85 yard touchdown called back for a holding call that was just kind of They had some pass interference on plays as well that really kind of ruined things. And so, like, I think the Raiders were kind of outplayed in that game. I can't in all good conscience give up points to pick Denver, though. So I will take 2.5 and go with the Raiders in this spot. And boy, if that gets to 3, that might actually be something to click on because Denver doesn't strike me as a team that blows anyone out. From fantasy football, God, I hope you don't have to start anyone this week. For Denver, kind of nobody. If you have to, Cortland Sutton, he might get something here against the Raiders. I just said Amari Cooper almost had a gigantic touchdown against the Raiders, so, I mean, maybe Cortland Sutton gets that. Javonte Williams, if you're desperate, which it sounds like some people might be, but aside from that, not a whole lot. On the Raiders side, I don't want anything to do with their running game at all. Zamir White has been just dreadful to start this year. The pass catchers, I do think, Bowers has worked his way into being maybe the best player in this offense when Devontae Adams gets traded. Jacoby Myers is actually way more talented than I give him credit for and has played quite well so far this year. And they got this kid Tucker, who they are... And this is the one thing that I've been really happy about from a Raiders standpoint. They're showing some creativity in the offense. And Tucker is one of those guys who can go out and get it done with the speed that he has and some of the creativity that he has been rolling with. So that has been, I think, a real nice kind of growth moment there for the Raiders and Tucker. So I think for deeper leagues and maybe even some not so deep leagues, that's a pickup. I don't know if I'm playing him this week unless you have to, but that's certainly a pickup that you can roll with. Also, I am now just realizing that I normally schedule these Friday ones for noon. So I don't know why I was panicked to get this started at 10, but here we are. We're getting it early and getting it all out of the way on a scrambled Friday, but that just shows you where my head has been the last couple of days. 49ers -7.5 as they take on the Arizona Cardinals with the total at 49.5. San Francisco, they get the offense a little bit more on track last week against the New England Patriots. There was a couple of times where they were settling for field goals, maybe a little bit too much, but this is still a team that is showing now all the different things that they have. And I think you can start to feel a little bit more confident from a 49ers standpoint. But for Arizona, it has been a little bit limited the last couple of games. I do think 7.5 is a bit too much of a spread between these two. I do think that Arizona has kind of just... They've stumbled a little bit, and it hasn't looked all that great. Washington did just mollywop those guys, and Detroit did a pretty good job of limiting them. And so when you do look at it, it is 14 points and 13 points in the last couple of games. But I still think that there is a lot of offensive upside on this side. And I do think that San Francisco's defense, they just keep getting banged up and they keep getting banged up and they keep getting banged up. So I actually do think that Arizona covers the spread in this one. And so I will take Arizona +7.5. I just think that Arizona's offense is going to be enough to kind of keep pace with what San Francisco does. The 49ers probably win this game, but I do think that Arizona kind of keeps it close anyway. And from a fantasy standpoint, Kyler Murray, you're starting. James Conner, same. Harrison, yes. And we've said, deeper leagues, Wilson is getting more of the snaps, and now he's starting to get more of the targets, so he's someone that you can trust as well. And on the On the 49ers side, I think the Jennings thing's probably kind of done with Kittle and Samuel back. Ayuk, we had a conversation about him on Monday, on Tuesday, about whether we can trust him or not. I do think you have to kind of keep trusting him, but I don't think I would put I don't think I would put Jennings ahead of him. So we're back to Jennings being let's keep him around and just seeing. But I'm not trusting him at this point. But then I think you can go with Mason and then the studs over in San Francisco. And I think Purdy is a quarterback that you can start this week. The Giants taking on the Seattle Seahawks. The total is at 42.5 with Seattle, the home favorite of 7. The Giants are bad, okay? Seattle's defense kind of got lit up last week against the Detroit Lions. They kind of just couldn't stop anything. And so I am seeing a few people trending a little bit more on the Giants side, and thinking like Seattle's defense, like maybe they're not going to be able to stop this, and that's going to be that. There's a big difference, I think, between Daniel Jones and Jared Goff, right? And there's a big difference between like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Wan'Dale Robinson, and I don't even know who to compare on the Giants beyond that, because you've never heard of any of them. Malik Neighbors is going to be out this week with a concussion, and so I don't see how the Giants keep up with this. And also the Giants defense isn't going to do shit against the Seattle offense. So I think that this is one that you can feel comfortable with taking Seattle minus the 7. If you want to throw them on a bit of a teaser side, maybe you can do that, although there aren't a whole lot of other obvious options in this one. Maybe adding 6 to the Raiders, so you can take it through a couple of key numbers there and go Raiders plus 8.5 along with a Seattle tease at minus 7. Again, not advice, just putting it out there, you know. From a fantasy standpoint, I do think you can go with Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, there were yards to be had through the air last week for the Lions against Seattle. And Wan'Dale Robinson got just a shitload of targets. I think it was 11 receptions for 71 yards, which kind of tells you all you need to know about this offense. But I think that he is going to be a factor. But the rest of them, like, I guess if you're desperate, and like Singletary is a fine start, I guess, this week with how Gibbs was able to power run the ball against Seattle. And so that is... that's an option as well, but those are the only two. And for Seattle, I think you can start everybody. Kenneth Walker looked like a stud, and goddamn was that annoying. I lost to Aaron Vickers from NHL.com in Calgary Media League because Kenneth Walker just kept scoring touchdowns. It was funny. We had, and I know no one wants to hear about anyone else's fantasy league, but we had just an absolutely putrid battle on Sunday, and then Monday night comes, and it's just Kenneth Walker, touchdown. Jamison Williams, 70-yard touchdown. And we just, like, our Monday night guys were just, like, back and forth, just absolute haymakers. And eventually, last Kenneth Walker score ends up putting him over the top. But, yeah, it was quite the performance. And I think he is a guy. I do think you can still start Charbonnet. I think he is a bit more of a flex option. And I think you roll with Smith and Jigba, Lockett, and Metcalf at receiver. And you just kind of hope that it's their game. Lockett... Like, I think there's going to be room for all of them to contribute in this game anyway. Rams taking on the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are favored by 3. The total is at 48.5. I am curious as to why this is so low. And maybe this is an overreaction from me. But one of the things we talked about on Tuesday is it's time for us to stop taking the Rams so seriously. Because they continue to just let us down and let us down and let us down. And they had that nice showing in week 1 against Detroit, where they kind of hung around and forced that game into overtime. And then they get a win over the 49ers in a great comeback. But that was a Lions team that, I mean, they still only scored 20. And the Lions put up some yards. They just weren't able to finish drives, and they're still figuring some stuff out. Week 2, they get just shit pumped by Arizona, and it's 21-0 before that game really even started. And then week 3, they're getting curb stomped by San Francisco until the fourth quarter when Kyle Shanahan all over that game, and they blew another late lead, and the Rams were able to come back. And then last week, they had way too much trouble with that Chicago Bears team. So you'll excuse me if I don't know why we need to take them seriously, even at home against the Green Bay Packers. The Rams do have a bit more of a home field advantage at SoFi than the Chargers do, but you're going to tell me that place ain't going to be at least like 40% Packers fans on Sunday afternoon in Los Angeles in October? Yeah, there's going to be fans from Green Bay who want to get the hell out of Dodge for a weekend to go to LA. Yeah, 100%. So I think that this is going to be a Green Bay team that actually puts up quite a few points. I know there's no Christian Walker, but this is why you have like 18 talented wide receivers on your team, is so that when one guy goes down, you just keep filling them up and you don't really have to worry about any of the repercussions, and you just kind of keep rolling with that. So I think the Green Bay Packers get the job done. And I just think this offense is too good for this defense to stop. Like, they gave up 24 points to Chicago last week. And Chicago is one of the easier teams to defend. You just send 5, and all of a sudden you've cracked the code. And so I think seeing how Jordan Love got back into the swing of things in the back part of that game against Minnesota, I think he's going to be a bit more ready, a bit more prepared, and going to come out and beat on the LA Rams. So that one surprises me to the point where I'm looking at it like, what am I missing in this one? We'll be waiting all day for Sunday night. It'll be the Steelers, 2.5-point favorites at home against the Dallas Cowboys, the total at 43.5. This one I don't think will be very pretty, but I do agree that the Pittsburgh Steelers should be favored here. I was worried we were taking a lot of favorites, but there was a stretch in the middle there where we took some underdogs, because I'm going Steelers here in this one as well. Pittsburgh, offensively, that they showed a little bit last week against Indy, and the Dallas defense is banged up and also isn't good. And so I think that this is going to be a week where there are going to be some points scored. Hey, Conrad, how's it going? This is going to be a week where there's going to be some points scored for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Justin Fields continues to learn this offense. Arthur Smith continues to learn how to use him, I think, a little bit inefficiently, but uses him. And Dallas's defense, with the injuries that they have, is not one that really threatens you. The Steelers defense did kind of, I don't want to say got exposed last week, but there was just a little bit of a, maybe you're not as good as we think you are. No Highsmith this week again for Pittsburgh, and that is a concern over the middle, but I do still think that Pittsburgh defense is going to give Dallas a lot of problems offensively. And quite frankly, Dallas's offense is a little bit one-dimensional at this point. The team can't run for shit, and they have one good receiver. You're telling me that Mike Tomlin can't figure that out? So I think the Steelers win this one kind of going away, and we talk about we're not taking the Steelers seriously enough when everything resumes on Monday. Speaking of Monday Night Football, it is the Chiefs taking on the New Orleans Saints. We'll get to that in a second. We got to talk fantasy. Yeah, Conrad, Mooney's beasting. And we kind of talked about Mooney as someone that you may want to look at from a waiver wire standpoint, but he is certainly benefiting from Kirk Cousins, probably the most of anyone in that offense. And so if you need, I think there's going to be a little bit more of a aggressiveness for some teams in fantasy. Like Toxic earlier had Mike Evans. So I think Eric, who's playing Toxic this week in the Vampire League, needs to maybe be a bit more aggressive. And so this is where I think lineup construction comes in. So if you're like Conrad and Mooney torched you, or if you are like Eric and you're playing Toxic who had Mike Evans, or you're like me and you're a little bit behind, I think this is where you go with a little bit more boom or bust sort of players. There are guys on your bench who are going to be the more safe ones, probably, right? Like we talked about Zach Moss before. He's safe. Devin Singletary's safe. They're not going to blow up, but they're not going to kill you. But I do think when you are behind in those sorts of ways, I do think that it is smart to kind of go out and go with the, all right, home run swing, man. Let's fucking go. Maybe we were just going to go with Sam Darnold before, but fuck it, man. Let's roll with Justin Fields and just see what happens. See if we can get a rushing touchdown or two in there as well. So yeah, that's... I think that needs to be kind of discussed here, is that you do need to be a little bit more aggressive with your lineups. And so I forgot to do fantasy breakdowns for a couple of games. So going back, Packers against the Rams, I just said, I think you're starting Jordan Love this week, and you're probably starting Jordan Love every week. And you're starting basically all the Green Bay pass catchers, right? Like Wicks. I think Reed is so talented, and I just got that one wrong this preseason. And Dubs has a chance to get into the end zone, so I think you have to start all of those guys. I'm in a spot similar to you, Conrad, where in one of my leagues, my season has gone to shit, and it is another week where I'm kind of projected to be on the wrong side of things. So I'm throwing Wicks in just to try to get that home run swing out of it. You can start Josh Jacobs. I think that's going to be a good one. And Emmanuel Wilson I don't think you can roll him out there as a for sure start just yet. But if you're in a desperate situation, I do think that he's getting a little bit more of the workload out in Green Bay than people were anticipating. And so he can be a guy that in deep leagues you can throw out there and at least hope. For the Rams, there isn't a whole lot. It's Kyron Williams. Green Bay's defense, I don't think is that good that you just don't start Matthew Stafford this week. It's not that bad that you absolutely have to, but I think he is a very valuable streaming option, and I don't trust any of the pass catchers in LA right now. Cowboys against Steelers from fantasy standpoint, I do think that as an if you are desperate sort of a play, Justin Fields is pretty good as a streaming option this week. Najee Harris is a go, and for deep leagues, Cordell Patterson. If Najee Harris isn't playing, which definitely check that, or sorry, if Jalen Warren isn't playing, which definitely keep an eye on that. But Cordero Patterson, I think, has some value in this offense. We know Arthur Smith loves him. We know that the kind of the lightning in Thunder and Lightning combinations in Pittsburgh actually works pretty well. And so I think you can go with that. And then George Pickens is a play. For Dallas, I would not be... If I could avoid Dak this week, I would. I'm not starting any of the running backs, and CeeDee Lamb is kind of the only receiver that you can go with. And I haven't talked about tight end a whole lot in any of these. If you have the tight end in any of these matchups, just fucking throw them out and see what happens. Sorry, Toxic. I should be a bit more specific. What's considered a deep league? 12 teams? I wouldn't consider a 12-team league super deep necessarily. I guess that 12 is kind of the whatever. Anything beyond 12, I would consider deep. Like I consider a 14-team league deep, and I consider a 16-team league to be deep. And then anything beyond that, you're a fucking psychopath. But for 12 teams, if it is moderately competitive or deeper benches, then you can consider that deep. But when I am saying like, oh yeah, Cordero Patterson in a deeper league, I am thinking more 14 and 16 team leagues. Oddly enough, I'm seeing more 16 than 14. It's funny, once you get to 14, it's like, yeah, fuck it, man. Let's just get half the league. Let's go. But I do think that that's, not a bad suggestion there. Anyway, 18-team Dynasty League. Let's go. Holy hell. That's something, man. That's crazy. I've never played an 18-team league before. The 16 is the deepest I've gone. 16-team with 5 keepers and a bench that is way too deep for that sort of a thing. But would love to try something a little bit deeper like that. Also, I'm not in any like full dynasty where you play like the whole season and there's a rookie draft and you can add and drop guys throughout the offseason and stuff like that, and you just keep everyone. I'm not in one of those, so I'd like to do that too. That would be a fun kind of a rainy day episode, like different kind of fantasy leagues I would like to try. We're doing one this year with the Vampire League, and it is a lot more difficult than I thought. But it's been a lot of fun to try and get that going, but a win would be nice in it. All right, Monday Night Football. It is the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the... Oh, dude, Game Over Dynasty. Yeah, I mean, look, Game Over. There's going to be announcements on hirings here probably pretty soon, but we're going to have a deep roster, so we could do just like a full NHL like sim league where we're basically going to have enough players or enough people in the league to just do like the entire league and just roll with it that way. By the way, sim league, something I have to try at some point. Baseball probably more than any other sport, but it would be fun to do in anything. Monday Night Football, Saints, Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are favored by 5.5 points with the total, I believe, I don't know why I closed my app. Well, I do know why. Someone offered me a lowball trade offer. Is 42.5. So the Kansas City Chiefs, everybody is hurt. Everybody hurts. And I'm kidding. It was a joke. Kind of. It was the Kansas City Chiefs. Everybody is hurt right now, right? Rashee Rice, his leg got put on backwards. Isaiah Pacheco broke something. And so there isn't a whole lot of offensive weaponry here. But I do think that this is now the start of the Travis Kelce playing himself into shape world tour, where he goes out and kind of reminds us all of how good how good he can be in still as a tight end, and show why he is one of the greatest tight ends, probably the greatest tight end in the history of the sport. But it's going to be tough for Kansas City to move the ball. And for one thing in this game, I have a ton of respect for the New Orleans Saints defense. I am probably going to avoid the side in this. I think Kansas City wins because they are just a better team than the Saints. But given the injury issues that Kansas City has, I do think that this is going to be on the lower side. So I'm going to take under 42.5. The Saints offense, I think they're starting to normalize a little bit. It's not this juggernaut that we saw in the first couple of weeks of the season, but it's not we're only scoring 12 points against the Eagles. I think they're going to be selling right around maybe an average offense with some high-end upside. But I do think that this is going to be a week where Kansas City shuts things down. Having McDuffie as kind of your lockdown corner is so valuable because they can just put him on Olave and it's just done. And then you can kind of bracket Shaheed, and there isn't a whole lot else that the New Orleans offense can do. So I do think that, again, this is going to be a real low-scoring game. From a fantasy football standpoint, for the Saints, I just said that they're going to try to just, like, one-on-one take away Olave. You still kind of have to play him. And we have seen number 2 options do well against Kansas City this year. You think back, like, Likely has an unbelievable game, right? Mike Gesicki has a really, really good game for the Bengals. And then in week 3, it was the Falcons. And again, it was Mooney who comes up with a pretty good game. Now, London has a good drive late, and that gets him kind of over what we had talked about before. But, and then in the Chargers, like, they don't have any passing options that can really do anything against you. So, I do think that this is a game where you can roll with Shaheed a little bit, and you kind of just have to trust with Olave and hope that scheme-wise, there's a late drive where they just kind of throw him the ball a ton. Keep an eye on Taysom Hill. If he is not in the lineup, I think Juwan Johnson as the tight end can be a good option for you, for sure, as a kind of late, like, panic move. And if you are super desperate, I do think Noah Gray, the backup tight end for Kansas City, does help get that ball rolling a little bit with this team because they just need high-level pass catchers right now. And I don't know if Gray would categorize as high level, but I would trust him more than I would trust like Juju Smith-Schuster or anything right now. So I think that they're going to see a little bit more of that. So if you want to roll with Taysom Hill and roll the dice, like I'm going to have to in one of my leagues, and just kind of hope for the best that either he is playing or whatever, then you can, or you find out, I guess, earlier and you don't have to. But I think you can then pivot to a couple of the options in this game. On the Kansas City side, I can't believe I'm saying this. I would try to not start Mahomes. He has, I listen to the fantasy footballers. He's basically a streamer right now, and this isn't a good matchup for him. And so I would be looking elsewhere for Patrick Mahomes options if I were you. And honestly, like, I would not go with Derek Carr here, but it would be an interesting thing to go through and figure out, like, okay, who would I start over Patrick Mahomes? So I would kind of try to not. Kareem Hunt, if you can get over the type of dude that he is, you can absolutely throw him into your line. Obviously, you picked him up, you kind of crossed that bridge. So if you have him, you are starting him. I do think Samaje Perine has the option and has the ability to do something, because I do think this game's going to be close. And so I think the pass catching back has some value. And again, given the injuries that Kansas City has, they are just going to have to throw it to talented players. Crimney, Drake London is back. We got that one loud and clear from the Atlanta Falcons that he is back. And even Kyle Pitts having a pretty good game. Maybe we need to recalibrate what we think of Tampa Bay's defense a little bit. Tampa Bay's turning into a team we can't really trust, right? We think we can trust them against Denver. Shit kicked. We don't think we can trust them against Philadelphia. Dominated. We think we can maybe trust them against Atlanta. Shit kicked. So we're kind of all over the place on the Tampa Bay defense there after we saw that this week. But for pass catching options, like I said, I think Perine is a sneaky play this week. And I do think that you can roll with Worthy. I would be interested to see how Dennis Allen tries to take him out. And like I said, if you're desperate because of Taysom Hill's injury situation, I think you can roll with Noah Gray in this game because Kansas City just needs people who can catch the football right now. Crimney with a couple of thoughts, as well as Conrad. I'm rolling the dice on DK and Wandale, as both are listed as questionable. Yeah, I think they'll play. I don't get this. You know what I miss? Probable. I don't know why the NFL got rid of probable, because that was a whole lot. Questionable was like, oh, it's 50-50. I don't know. And now that's the best one you have. So I don't know why we got rid of probable. That was so nice when we lived in probable, questionable, and doubtful. You know, they never tell you that you're in the good old days until after, right? Or whatever that line is. I miss I miss probable. And so I would assume, Conrad, that DK and Wandale would both have been listed as probable had that distinction been allowed in this silly league that we call the NFL. But I would feel comfortable with them. And honestly, I think both guys have good games. Seattle, both in the same game. Seattle going up against the Giants. Giants can't stop a nosebleed. And Seattle, like, Wandale Robinson is going to be that number one option for the Giants, which is damning with faint praise, but also Seattle gave up a bunch of yards through the air last week. So I do think that there's going to be volume and maybe some opportunity for Wandale Robinson moving forward. Crimney need a running back this week. Is it smart to pick up Eckler? Their defense had a lot of injuries. Eckler also got banged up last week, so I would check on that status if you know what? I'm here. I like obviously have an internet connection. So let's see how we looking Austin Eckler wise. Because McNichols came in and actually looked pretty good in replacing him. Clear to play on Sunday, so he should be good to go. That was 26 minutes ago, according to rotoballer.com. And if we cannot trust Rotoballer, who can we trust? Cut to 3 weeks from now, me working for them. But I think Eckler's an okay pickup. Yeah. If I'm looking at like desperation type moves, I think there are a couple of the pass catching option running backs that you can trust maybe a little bit more than Eckler, because Robinson's been a beast for Washington. Now, Robinson sounds like he's going to be a game time decision. So this is one of those roll the dice things that we talked about before. If Robinson's banged up, then Eckler all of a sudden becomes a really good play. And Eckler, it was a concussion for him. And obviously, like we've seen with Tua, once that button, from experience, once that button gets pushed, it's easier to push it again, but it's not the same as like an ankle injury where it just, like you can kind of tweak it or whatever. You can't tweak a concussion. So I mean, you probably can, but you know what I am saying. Like, it's not as easily re-injured or whatever, right? Like everyone can get concussions. It's football. So what I'm saying is, if Robinson is out, then Eckler is an amazing pickup. A couple other guys who I wouldn't mind, like I said before, Justice Hill for Baltimore is, I think, a good play. Given how close the Baltimore-Cincinnati game projects to be, I do think there are going to be some drives where Baltimore needs to throw the ball, and that ain't Derrick Henry's bag. So I think Justice Hill is actually going to get a pretty good chunk of the snaps this week, and thus a pretty good amount of the opportunities. And like I just said in the Monday night game, I think Samaje Perine has the option, just given the lack of weapons out in Kansas City, that he is going to get, I think, a few pass-catching options as well. So I would probably rank that Eckler, Hill, and then Perine, but I would maybe, if it does seem like Robinson's going to play, I would maybe flip Hill and Eckler, just for the situation that I think Baltimore is going to be in. But I do think Eckler is a pretty good play. Toxic saying here, Jonathan Taylor officially out. And so Toxic, very sneaky during the show, races out and picks up Trey Sermon in the Vampire League. And so Crimney, for you, if Trey Sermon's available in your league, I think that's a pretty good pickup as well, going up against a Jacksonville defense that, off the top of my head, I don't think they're like a stalwart against the run or anything like that. Like, Houston didn't really get to them a whole lot last week. Buffalo, I mean, just kicked the shit out of them. So they probably ran the ball for half of the game, so you don't get a good read on that one. I feel like Jerome Ford had an okay game against them, and then Miami's Miami. So you don't really have a good sense of that, but I do think that Trey Sermon has a good game. So I would maybe put him at the top of the list for those kind of desperation running backs. Conrad asking, thoughts on Cam Akers as a streamer? You have Houston going up against the Buffalo Bills. With Joe Mixon out, I think that Cam Akers has an opportunity here. He is... someone picked up Sermon already. All right, sorry, Crimney. I think like Cam Akers is very obviously limited by the injuries that he has had in his career. He has kind of turned into... Coach told me there'd be hole here, so I run through hole here. And he is not getting anything that isn't blocked for him. The good news is Buffalo can give up a lot that isn't blocked. So I think that he is a good option as a streaming running back. It seems like running back is the topic du jour this week. I probably said that wrong. Either way, when you look at this now, the running backs that we have discussed here today, I still think I would put Sermon first. And then Boy, where would I put Akers in that whole thing? Sermon first. I do think I would probably go Akers second, just on the volume that he would be getting, and then Hill, and then Eckler, and then Pirine. But again, all of them I think are varying degrees of pretty good options this week. Sutton, Wandale, Higgins, and Shaheed tossed up on who to start. Boy, that is an interesting question. The Raiders do give up big plays. We talked about it when we were doing that preview, where there is a play in that game against Cleveland where Amari Cooper gets an 80-yard touchdown. And everyone's celebrating, and it comes back because of a holding call. Not saying that Denver wouldn't hold or anything like that, but there are at least those options available for big gains for the Denver Broncos in this game. Wandale, I think you have to start, given the situation that he is in. He's the number one wide receiver on his team, and he is the guy that I think can take advantage of where Seattle is lacking in their secondary. So I would start Wandale for sure. He would be my one in that list. Higgins, I still need to see it a little bit more. And I think Baltimore is familiar enough with the Bengals that they'll be able to figure that one out. So I would probably, and then Shaheed, we talked about it. Kansas City is good at taking away your number one option, and number two options have kind of thrived against the Chiefs so far this year. So I think Shaheed actually has a pretty good day. So I would probably rank those Wandale, Shaheed, Sutton, and Higgins right now. That would be how I would rank those ones. It's crazy. Who would have thought? Probably at the beginning of the year, we would have assumed Higgins would have been the bottom of that list because of how everything went. But going into training camp, who would have thought that Higgins would be at the bottom of that particular list? That's absolutely crazy. So anyway, should be a fun week. Thank you guys so much for all the fantasy questions. Keep them coming. And if we get a few more, we'll probably do another segment kind of tacked on at the end. But I am going to shift now to football of different kind. Still to come, we got UFC 307 preview coming up, and we have WWE Bad Blood preview as well. And more of your fantasy football questions at the end of the show, if you guys have some more of those coming on in. But we are going to shift now to 3-down football in a 3-game week for the Canadian Football League, but a big one here in the CFL. The always unpredictable world of the Canadian Football League travels into Week 18 with just 3 games on the schedule, 2 of them tonight, and then a Saturday night tilt in Edmonton between the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the Edmonton Elks. Let's just going to go quickly because I quite frankly, I've seen the numbers, and I know that the CFL segments don't necessarily thrive on here. So that is why I told you coming in, hey, we're going to talk about some other stuff in a second, but just let me get my jollies off here with the Canadian Football League, and we'll go on from there. Winnipeg taking on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. By the way, for best bets, projections or predictions or whatever, I do have a story up. I'll put it here in the chat, actually. You know, gotta promote myself where I can. But the best bets for 3-Down Nation for this week. There's 3 picks that I am going with. You have to go read that to get the official predictions, I guess. So I'm not going to give out any official plays here, but just going to tell you what I think about each game. So we start with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Winnipeg, they seem like they have figured it out now. The offense hadn't really been clicking up to this point. They were scoring points. They put up a bunch of points against Saskatchewan, but it still didn't look comfortable. It looked comfortable against Edmonton last week. And that's an Edmonton defense that was kind of improving, but kind of not. But defensively, this team is just so good right now. And while Hamilton is doing a better job of limiting points with their defense, I do worry about what this offense can do against Winnipeg's defense. And so, Hamilton's bounce back here has been great. They are basically pushing up on BC for that last playoff spot in the first ever east to west crossover. We've never had it before. And I made the joke on CFL this week when I was there a couple of weeks ago. I actually had someone told me that you can't at one point because, one league has more teams than the other. So you can't, or one division, sorry, has more teams than the other. So you can't have an east-west crossover. And I was like, okay, well, that checks out. We've never seen it, so maybe that's why. And it was only until years later that I realized that, oh no, that's actually not a thing. Hamilton does have a real opportunity here, but this is a really tough matchup against Winnipeg. And I just think the Bombers are playing as the most complete football team probably in the league right now. So I think the Bombers do end up getting the job done. Calgary going into BC to take on the Lions. Conrad, only prediction I think, Stamps officially eliminated. Yeah. This is tough. Like the spread in this game was 7. And so admittedly I stayed away from it on the best bets because I don't trust BC to be a team that can put up those sorts of points. Now, Calgary has been doggy doo-doo on the road so far this year, and BC actually has a pretty good home field advantage, which could help them out into November, although it seems like they're going to have to win at least one road game if they are going to get to that point, and that is a road game that they have had challenges with in the past, but we will talk about that next month. For now, it's so inconsistent with BC. 1 week it looks like Rorick's figured it out, the next he hasn't. 1 week this defense looks great because they have Betts, and then they get Haladic back, and the defense gives up a ton of points to Hamilton and loses. They have had too many we got this games and have not looked good. And honestly, Calgary was the benefactors of one of those, where the Lions, I think, had their worst game of the year at McMahon and ended up losing 25-24, even though the Stampeders gave them all sorts of opportunities to come back into that game. So I do think BC wins this game, but it is going to be, I think, surprisingly close. And then we get to Saturday. It is the Saskatchewan Roughriders taking on the Elks of Edmonton. Saskatchewan coming off of back-to-back wins. Edmonton, it feels like their party has kind of calmed down after Winnipeg kicked the shit out of them last week. The one thing that I think Saskatchewan is going to have to do, they have to be better on first down. They are the worst team in the league on first down, and it has set up so many 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, and the joke amongst my Rider fan friends has been for the last couple of years, even though we only had him for a little bit last year. Man, if you need 9 yards on second down, there is no one better than Trevor Harris at getting you 7 yards. And part of that is the receivers running the routes and stuff like that. I don't know what it is about this team that if it's 2nd and 7, we are running a 5-yard out. I get tackling in the CFL ain't the NFL, but it's gotten better. And we need to stop relying on those sorts of things, just as a league in general, but as a Saskatchewan Roughriders, definitely. So they need to be better on first down, but they need to be a little bit more aggressive offensively. And they have been that at times. But Edmonton is so bad at giving up the big play. They have given up the most in the Canadian Football League this year. Now, Saskatchewan has some of the least amount of big plays, but with guys like Emelis, Keyshawn Johnson has shown to be a real weapon, I think, down the field as well. I think you have a couple of guys that Saskatchewan can take advantage of that against Edmonton. And this Riders defense is getting healthier. I didn't see the practice report yesterday, so I don't know if Revis is playing or if Cox is playing. But still, getting Milligan back, getting Lanier back on the defensive line, along with Micah Johnson, those guys have stepped up. I just think it's a long day for Edmonton. The Riders got run all over by Edmonton when these two teams play. You can tell by the breakdowns which game I'm the most focused on, right? But they ran all over Saskatchewan last time these two teams played, but that was with Trey Ford. It's going to be MBT back there, and against basically everyone else, Saskatchewan has done a great job of shutting down the run, and so I think they will turn Edmonton into being a bit of a one-dimensional football team, and that's where the Riders thrive. So I think Saskatchewan ends up getting the job done there. All right, that was the CFL talk. Thank you guys so much for indulging me on that one as we go along here. Now, we will shift into the world of fight sports as we go from Football Friday to a Fighting Friday. It is UFC 307. It is WWE Bad Blood, TKO, taking over everything here. Let's start with the fight preview. UFC 307 goes down in Salt Lake City, Utah. A hotbed for the Ultimate Fighting Championship suddenly. Thanks, I'm sure, in no part to the Salt Lake City City Council and the government in Utah paying TKO lots of money to go there. But either way, in the main event, it is Alex Pereira defending the UFC's Light Heavyweight Championship against number 7 contender, Khalil Roundtree. Also, we have the women's bantamweight title on the line as Raquel Pennington goes up against Juliana Pena. Conrad, we'll get to the wrestling question there in the wrestling talk, but a slight teaser, because Conrad asking, not a preview, but a question, thoughts on NXT Black and Silver rebrand. Initial thought, okay, let's go into the fight breakdown. And normally I like to do real, okay, this is what these guys have done in the last little bit. This is whatever. If you've seen my previews before, you know how I kind of like to do it. But as I explained before, this morning has been chaotic. I got sick late last night and didn't have the most awesome of sleeps. I woke up feeling a little bit better today, and the wonderful combination of Advil, Tums, and Monster Energy is powering me through. So you can probably tell I'm a little bit more than normal for this one. But also, my laptop wasn't working until literally 2 minutes before the show started. So I didn't get to do as in-depth of previews on these. So a little bit more of this is just going to be a bit off the cuff, so to speak. So, just going to do a main card preview for this one. And the app I was using doesn't give me, names. So that's annoying. But if we go here to our trusty Wikipedia, if there was anything that happened in the weigh-ins, and I missed it, I apologize for that. But in the middleweight division, it is Roman Dolidze against Kevin Holland. Again, this fight happening at middleweight. Dolidze is a plus 130 underdog against Kevin Holland. Holland is kind of one of those post-hype sleepers that people talk about in fantasy football a whole lot. Oh, wow, Wikipedia's looking for donations. Look at that. Where there was a lot of hype around this guy, and it just hasn't quite got there recently for him. He was kind of brought in, I don't want to say as a sacrificial lamb, but he was brought in to kind of make MVP look good. Now, he bounces back with a win over Michael Oleksiejczuk back at UFC 302 with a submission win there. But he is still 3-4 in his last 7, with the wins being against Oleksiejczuk, Chiesa, and Santiago Ponzinibbio. And the losses against Paige, Della Maddalena, Stephen One Boy Thompson, and Khamzat Chimaev. And so, yes, those are kind of tippy-top fighters in this division. And you could very well explain, okay, well, he only loses to the big guys. I don't think Dolidze is that. And Dolidze himself, coming off of a couple of losses against Marvin Vettori and Nasruddin Imavov, before picking up a win over Anthony Smith. And so both of these guys, with Dolidze being 36 and Ken Holland being 31. Boy, Kevin Holland's only 31. Feels like he's been around longer than that. But you have, I think, a couple of guys who had a little bit of, Dolidze wasn't, I don't think ever okay, watch out for this guy. He was more just a guy who worked his way into, back half of the top 15 rankings, and so to speak. But Holland was someone where, hey, this guy could be a championship contender. And he's had some injury issues and all of those things. And so maybe he gets it back on track. It is tempting to throw out Dolidze as an underdog play. But I do think Kevin Holland, just a in-depth analysis here, I think Kevin Holland's a better fighter than Dolidze is. And so I do think that on their best days, Holland probably doesn't even make it close with Dolidze, quite frankly. And so I do think Holland ends up getting the win. Next, we go to Ketlin Vieira against Kayla Harrison. This one in the women's bantamweight division. Harrison is a strong favorite at minus 1150. Vieira is a plus 650 underdog. Harrison, for a long time, held the moniker of best fighter not in the UFC, and now she's hoping to hold the moniker of best fighter in the UFC. She is likely a win away from a title shot. She is already in press conferences shit-talking Juliana Pena. The one concern you would have is that she is looking past Vieira. Now, Ketlin's a talented fighter. And against, honestly, most fighters in this division, Ketlin, I think, would be favored. And she would be a fighter that I would be looking at. She has losses against Yana Kunitskaya and Raquel Pennington recently. So one of them is a champion, and one of them is a little underrated in Kunitskaya. But she does have wins over Miesha Tate, Holly Holm, and fighters like that. Also, previously in her career, Kat Zingano and Sarah McMahon. So Vieira is a very talented fighter, but Harrison is just a different kind of animal. And I think someone who will go out and get the job done here. There is no value at all, in taking Harrison just to win at minus 1150. So the official prediction here is Harrison by decision. I think she grinds out another win. Third from the top, it is Jose Aldo. The legend returns as he steps back into the octagon against Mario Bautista, who is a 31-year-old fighter from some place I've never heard of in Nevada. For Bautista, he is on quite the winning streak. He has not lost since UFC 259 back in March of 2021. He was 8-2 at that time, and now he's 14-2. So that's 6 fights in a row that this guy has rattled off, including a win by unanimous decision over Ricky Simone back in January of this year at an Ultimate Fight Night show. For Jose Aldo, the resume is legendary. He is one of the greatest fighters in the history of this sport. Now, that was a while ago that he was doing that. And you can certainly say that there is a falling off happening with Jose Aldo. He lost to Merab back at UFC 278. Merab's the champion now. Aside from that, like, he's won 4 of his last 5 against Chito Vera, Pedro Munoz, Rob Font, and Jonathan Martinez. I do think that just because this Jose Aldo would lose to previous version Jose Aldo, we kind of assume that this Jose Aldo would lose to other fighters as well. And I don't believe that's the case. I think Aldo is legitimately still a good fighter. And at plus 120, I just think he has a little bit more striking than most of the... He's a little bit more striking than most human beings on the planet. But he has a little bit more striking edge than most fighters that Bautista has faced so far in his career. And so I just don't think he is ready for that sort of a output and that sort of a game plan coming at him. And so it is for that reason that I think Jose Aldo gets the win in this fight as the underdog at plus 125. Co-main event for the Women's Bantamweight Championship. It is Juliana Pena looking to unseat Raquel Pennington and get back the belt that she lost to Amanda Nunes. These two go back to the Ultimate Fighter, and this is very difficult for me. And this is where it's like the head-heart thing. Because Raquel Pennington, so that season of the Ultimate Fighter, and it's why I still think there's a bit of value in the tough format if done well. That season of the Ultimate Fighter was the introduction of the women's bantamweight division, and it was also the first season of the Ultimate Fighter that came out when my wife and I started dating. And she is like Big Brother and Survivor and all of those reality shows. And so I was like, hey, if this feels like a very easy entry point, there's a reality show based on people who punch each other in the head. And so we watched Tough, and Raquel Pennington ended up being one of those fighters who you just fall in love with, right? And so that is... I have always liked Raquel Pennington. And I think that there is still a really talented fighter in there. And when you look at Raquel Pennington, really, it's quite the career arc that she ended up having. Because she goes out and just, and I cannot overstate this enough. A life-altering ass-kicking at the hands of Amanda Nunes. This was, A, at Amanda Nunes' peak, and B, this set off I am not kidding, months-long conversation about the role that corners play in the protection of their athletes, because it was so clear from the word go that Raquel Pennington was just in there to, it was literally what, speaking of dated references, it was literally what JWoww was saying in that episode of Jersey Shore. Step up, get your ass beat. Step up, get your ass beat. Step up, get your ass beat. That's what it was. Pennington would step up and Nunes would beat that ass and just kick the shit out of her. For, I think they ended up stopping it in the 5th round, but it was after the 3rd, it probably should have been stopped. And then definitely after the 4th. But you still have the corner being like, oh no, you're tough, you can do this. And even Raquel Pennington was like, hey, don't think I can. Probably not gonna happen for me this time. So can we just fucking cut this out? Because I'm getting the hell beat out of me here. And I do feel like that was it was a real conversation for a while. And that is the type of fight that changes fighters. We've seen, it was a bit of a different situation, but Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald. Rory was never the same after that. And we have seen a lot of guys who just get beat up. Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos, another one, where those fights really took it out of both of those fighters. And I know I'm now going to more competitive fights than what this one was, but this was so one-sided that it felt like, okay, well, this is the end of Raquel. And then she misses weight and loses to Jermaine Durandamy, then rattles off a ton of wins in a row and wins the Bantamweight Championship. Her nickname is Rocky, and it fits. She is the underdog story of all underdog stories. It is incredible what she has been able to do, and genuinely one of my favorite fighters. Going up against Juliana Pena, who talked a lot of shit and was just wildly unlikable, on the Ultimate Fighter season, to the point where she got hurt after her season of Tough. And a lot of people were saying that it was her camp was just annoyed with her and hurt her on purpose. That was a theory that was floated out for a little bit around that. And so, like, all of the nice, bubbly whatever that Raquel Pennington is, Juliana Pena isn't. But what she is a really talented fighter. And so she was able to work her way into a title fight. No one gave her a hope in hell. Nunes talked about having a bad weight cut and all of those things, and it didn't matter because Juliana Pena forever and always has a win over Amanda Nunes. I do think that she maybe took a little bit too much from that because she talked a whole lot of shit, and then Nunes basically just punted her for 5 rounds and ended up getting a win, and a dominant one, to get the championship back. But Pena has since then tried to lean into the heel approach a little bit more. And I get trying to embrace that when everyone kind of doesn't like you anyway, but she's not good at it. Like, oh, Amanda Nunes is retiring because she's afraid of me. It's like, yeah, I'm sure she's really worried about another 25-minute cardio kickboxing session where she plays target practice with your brain and ends up winning. Like, no one is buying that. And so no one's really buying this shtick from her at all. And she has become a little bit unlikable in all of these things. And that has been just a bit of a disaster. So I think you can kind of tell emotionally which fighter I like over the other, right? Here's the problem. I think Juliana Pena is a better fighter than Raquel Pennington is. And so from a prediction standpoint, I kind of hate it, but I'm going with Juliana Pena in this bout. I just feel like Raquel's stand-up is better than Juliana Pena's, no question. But I do think that Pena's ability to be able to get inside and get some takedowns and really start to wear this fight down and get things going that way is going to be her road to success. And so I just, it's not that I don't see Raquel Pennington being, having a hope in this one. Like, I certainly do. There's a reason why that, especially for a UFC title fight, the odds are actually pretty close on this fight, with Pennington as a minus 170 underdog. She does, minus 170 favorite. She does have more tools in the toolbox than Pena does. I just think the tools that Pena has are better. So I think Pena pulls off another upset and wins the bantamweight crown, and that gets her a shot with Kayla Harrison coming up at a later date. And then in the main event, it is Alex Pereira taking on Khalil Roundtree. Pereira is a minus 500 favorite, coming off of some amazing nights for him. He has turned himself into, when he kind of started this rise against Israel Adesanya, that was another one where I like one guy, I don't like the other guy. But the guy who I don't like just won. That's crazy. He kind of came in a little bit unlikable. But as it's gone on and you see the destruction, you see the talent, you see the crispness of the technique and everything like that, he has turned into one of my favorite fighters to watch, which is too bad because you only get to watch him for like 2.5 minutes because that's how quickly he is getting guys out of the cage with that. But he has one of the most meteoric rises in the history of the sport, going from kickboxing, where he was quite good, and then quickly into the UFC. Like 9 fights in, he's a 2-division champion and is toward the top of most pound-for-pound rankings. And now he's calling out heavyweights, and I think that will continue. He goes up against Khalil Roundtree. We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. It's a weird situation that Roundtree has found himself in. What's he going to do? Turn down a title shot? Of course not. But his last fight was called off because he had a positive test for a banned substance. And then, instead of, okay, well, let's give you one more fight, whatever, he just gets a title shot. It's insane that he is in this spot, but it's an opportunity for him. Also, he is another guy who comes from The Ultimate Fighter, and so he's another dude who my wife is actually kind of a big fan of. He can bring the action, and I think that for however long this fight lasts, it will be fun. And he has basically a puncher's chance, and that's about it. I think all of the circumstances leading into this fight would make this one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport if Khalil Roundtree was able to pull that off. It would be so out of nowhere, given all the circumstances leading into this fight, that it would be just mind-boggling for him to pull it off. Like, the thing that he is good at, Pereira is one of the best in the world at. So it's a really difficult situation for Roundtree to get into. Now, he has the skill and technique that he can land a shot and change the world. I simply do not see that happening. So I am going to go Pereira to win this fight rather convincingly and probably quickly in the main event of UFC 307 in Salt Lake City. All right, this has been a long one today. If you guys have been with me the whole time, thank you all so much for hanging out. We're going to get to Conrad's question about NXT Black and Silver, and we are going to get to WWE Bad Blood as we talk wrestling right now. Need a longer video than that. I was hoping to have some water there, but nonetheless, it is time for the wrestling talk. We're going to preview WWE Bad Blood, but first, just a quick look at the week. Didn't get to the Raw recap that I wanted to on Monday, but to Conrad's question to start, thoughts on the NXT Black and Silver rebrand? I like it a lot. I think it looks very, very sharp. Anything is better than the 2.0 stuff. We can all agree on that, right? But this makes it feel just a touch more legitimate. And I have always had a bit of an issue with NXT because I think that it should strictly be used as a developmental brand. And so, like, a lot of, okay, well, we have to do it, we're going to take it here, so we have to do this thing, and we're going to take it here, so we have to do that. And the slightest amount of times, the developmental part kind of gets lost in it a little bit. And so I think they've done a better job of kind of reining that in. And I think, to Conrad's point, no better example than with Trick Williams, who gets the championship back in a win over Ethan Page in what was a pretty fun match on Tuesday night out in Chicago with CM Punk as the special guest referee. But there would have been some times where Trick Williams, with some of these new guys coming in, I guess with just the one, with All Ego Ethan Page coming in, and I think there would have been some times where he would have been either fast-tracked to the main roster or whatever. I think Trick Williams is over as fuck. And I think he is incredibly talented. But I do think there are some things that need to be rounded out a little bit. Like, you watch the intro video where, like, he's on this, like, CW local news station, and he's doing a NASCAR interview or something. No, it's college football, because CW has college football. He's doing all these things, and it's like, it's not as polished as you would like it to be for a guy who obviously, like, he has charisma and he has so much talent. Like, that there is a lot there that still, I think, needs to be harnessed. And I think you can get a legitimate star out of this kid, no question. And you kind of already have, right? Like, whoop that trick. The chant is over. People get so excited to see this guy come out, and he has put on some baller matches, even if Dave Meltzer didn't like some of them. He has been really fun to watch in a lot of these. And so I like that they are continuing to roll with him instead of, well, you lost the title, now you can go up to the main roster and kind of flounder along with Carmelo Hayes. They, I think, have a real project with him, and I think it's a whole lot of fun. But overall, like, the whole NXT show was great. The women's title match, maybe you would have liked a bit more of a legitimate finish there, but Cora Jade and Roxanne, I think, would be an interesting tag team and provide a little bit of personality to a tag team division that would need it. But I think they can be some real good heels on the top of the NXT women's roster for a bit. And combined with what you have with Julia and Stephanie Vacour, I think that you can, like, the mix and match all of those and have a pretty good, like, 6 months to a year with all of them. Roxanne, I was skeptical of the heel turn to begin with. I think that she is perfect in kind of the, I'm just saying as a type, not as a comparison of their skills, but kind of a Rey Mysterio type, where she's smaller than everyone, but everyone loves her. There's just something infectious about her personality, and you fall in love with this girl. And she's so exciting to watch and so talented to watch that when they turned her heel, it's like, that doesn't really fit. But she has really embraced this heel role and done a tremendous job of kind of cultivating that character. And it's been so much fun to watch her do that. And now, like, she had a great match, I thought, with Julia. I think she's going to have some great matches with Stephanie Vacour when she officially comes in, and adding Cora Jade, who plays that heel role to a T, right? And I think that having her back now really does add some things. Like the NXT women's division is like right there from having about 5 or 6 extremely talented stars ready to go. Like they are going to be the Detroit Red Wings of just like, well, they are overdeveloped in NXT. There's going to be a few that make their way to the main roster and really revitalize things. Not that they need it, because I think the main roster women's divisions are actually okay. It's kind of the tag team spot where they need the help, and that's why I think Roxanne and Cora Jade as a tag team is actually kind of interesting. But they have a lot there that you can really work with, and at the top, I think it's interesting. Only thing I worry about is NXT Black and Silver killing NXT NA. Kind of seems like it, doesn't it? On the last USA one, or one of the big shows they had, Jordan Grace did her open challenge thing. But aside from that, like we had the end of the Rascals MSK thing. We had that kind of come to an end, and that felt very endy, right? And we haven't seen Joe Hendry in a while. There's been very little NXT NA involvement over the last little bit. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I hope that overall it continues. But it doesn't need to be an every week or even every month thing. It can just be an every once in a while, oh, holy shit, there's Alex Hammerstone. And he comes in. Also, how fucking cool was that to see Alex Hammerstone in WWE? Even if it was just NXT. I really love his stuff in MLW. And I think there's something there with that kid. Anyway, but every once in a while, like, oh shit, Moose has popped in. And I think you can do that a little bit more the other way as well. Because there's quite a few talented people in NXT right now, but there's a lot of them that just aren't quite main roster ready just yet. And so you only have a couple hours of TV every week. And like Level Up is what it is. But I think having some people go down and do like actual like 2 or 3 month feuds with TNA, I think that's where the real value of that relationship is you only have so much TV time. If you can use TNA as a little bit more of a developmental, and then like, yeah, like Conrad said, create some dream matches, right? Bring in Speedball versus Trick, right? Do that. That would be so much fun. Do Josh Alexander against fucking anybody. That would be a blast, right? You can do a lot of those things. And so I think the relationship there is still probably there. But I do think that you are going to see probably a little bit more of it reining back a little bit. And just as a surprise, like, oh shit, you said his name and he appeared. Out comes Joe Hendry. Right? I think it's going to be a little bit more of that. For Raw this week, I thought like the main thing is Braun Strowman against Bronson Reed. And that is probably, when we do the year in review, that is probably going to be my feud of the year. That was so much fun. It's dumb, but you don't see stuff like that anymore. And the difference is, when you did see it in the past in WWE, it was like goofy comedy things, whatever. But this was, like, it's as serious as you can be when you're splashing someone through a car and doing all of those things that they were doing, right? But it was taken as, these are 2 monster ass kickers who are going to go out and monstrously kick some ass. And that was the real high point, I thought, of the last little bit. In what was kind of supposed to be just like a blow off, like just a couple big guys have a match, this I think turned into feud of the year. I think has so elevated Bronson Reed. I worry a little bit of what is next with Braun Strowman, given that he was kind of in it with The Miz a little bit. I think that's not the turn we need there. I think that there needs to be maybe something a little bit more elevated from a Braun Strowman standpoint, but Bronson Reed, it's obvious what's next. It's a feud with Seth Rollins, and being in that sort of a thing, talk about elevation. Holy shit, do you get that? The Sami Zayn, Gunther stuff, I thought was quite fun, and I think they did a good job of getting you back to, of getting this match set up. And like all of the Gunther being, oh, wow, you got, yeah. I don't buy it from you. I don't buy it from you. I don't get it. I don't whatever. The one thing I wish that they would have done in the last little while is have Sami Zayn come out and win a bunch of these matches. That's kind of what I wish a little bit more. His promos have been amazing, and I think the way they tied it all together on Monday was actually kind of perfect and really fun. In like my family, I'm the golden goose. Golden Goose Gunther. I'm the golden goose. I'm the one who provides for my family. Your family is used to you losing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, let me just embarrass you in front of your family again. Like, I thought in the past, like, again, just to compare this to WWE 5 years ago, that would have been like, people would be chanting Gunther no balls. And they would have been, oh, you gotta get your balls out of Ludwig Kaiser's purse. It would have been that sort of shit. But to have it be, again, kind of a goofy thing in a more serious way, I think it was done perfectly. So I really enjoyed that. Like I said, the one thing I wish they would have done is Sami Zayn go out and like cut some of these promos after winning matches. And like, oh wow, he beats Kaiser. But aside from like he's not beating anyone. And the last big match we saw, he lost. So I think that there needs to be a little bit more, instead of just like, I have decided I'm going to be the one going for the championship now. Like, at any point, Gunther could have said, well, you got to beat this guy. Ah, well, now you got to beat this guy. Oh, and you got to beat him. Oh, and you got to do this. And you got to do that, right? Like, you have a big enough roster. Few of them can afford to lose a match or two, right? So have him go out and beat whoever. You can't do it now because he's hurt, but Ilya Dragunov a couple of weeks ago. Or someone along those lines. Like, just go out and win some matches. And I think that would have driven home the case more and more and more. It's like, I've already beat you. I'm beating all of these guys each and every week. Why am I not getting this opportunity? Instead of, I already beat you, and I lost the Intercontinental title. But aside from that, what else do I have to do? I think that could have been just done a little bit better, in my opinion. But overall, I think it's good. Braun Breaker gets a bit of a run-in with Gunther. I think that'd be too quick. I would like to see him have an actual main card feud before, like, post IC title, before we just throw him in off an Intercontinental title loss. Dragunov's injury, a bit of a bummer, and that kind of sucks. I'm still not all the way there on Judgment Day versus Terror Twins. There's just, I don't know what it is about some of it, where more specifically the Damian Priest side against Finn Balor, more so than like the Liv and Rhea stuff. I actually think has been built up pretty good. I know his dirty secret. He's claustrophobic. Was kind of dumb and not something that I was overly entertained by. And it felt a little bit forced to, like, explaining after the fact why we're doing it. So that was a little annoying. But that part has been good. But I'm not clicking with this new Damian Priest character. And something we talked about a while ago, where they have these badass heels. And it's something the whole wrestling industry has struggled with, right? It's something that Swerve struggled for a bit. Like, you have this badass big ass kicker as a heel, and now we're turning him babyface, and his lingo has to be a little bit more relatable, and he has to be a little bit more funny, and just kind of like the cool kid in school. I was like, no, the reason we liked him before, because he was kicking dudes' heads off. So just keep doing that, and keep, like, basically do everything that you were doing before, just for good now instead for evil, and we'll love you for it. But I think there's too many times they try to make it a bit too cute, and so that doesn't really work. But now to Bad Blood. I guess quickly here before we get into the full breakdown. Conrad saying, Crazy Steve for Halloween Havoc. Oh yeah. Like the whole Decay and former Decay and whatever, had like Crazy Steve and Rosemary and all of them for Halloween Havoc. 100%. Yeah, totally. And I think a big spot you'll see it is like the WrestleMania weekend stuff when there's all those people around. I think that you can have something with that. I would like to see them expand it a little bit more. Like we've seen them kind of, someone was off in the N1 in Noah, and those sorts of things. I would like to see more talent come into WWE from those particular brands, and do some stuff with them as well, and just kind of keep that forbidden door kind of open. But I think there's a few different options you can go, and a few different ways you can go, but 100%. For Halloween Havoc, I think that the dark stuff has kind of been overdone in pro wrestling, but Halloween Havoc and Halloween Havoc, come on, we got to do that, right? Like, so you got to have Crazy Steve coming in and doing some stuff there. All right, let's get into Bad Blood. According to Wikipedia, just a 5-match card right now. We will start with the tag team match. Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns against the Bloodline of Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu. it seems too obvious that Cody and Roman are going to get the win in this match. I think they probably will. But I do think that this is going to be the next advancement in the Bloodline story, where you have Cody and Roman probably go out and probably get the win. There will be a lot of shenanigans and stuff like that. And then after the match, whether it be Hikuleo or whoever comes out and kicks the shit out of Roman or Cody or whoever, I do think that you are going to have the next members of them come out. And then whether it is a Jimmy return, or it's Jay coming out to help on the other side, or something along those lines, I do think that you are going to have maybe a bit of a Bloodline spinoff. And to your point, Conrad, Conrad saying in the chat, I actually think KO prevents Cody and Roman from getting the win because of his hatred for Roman. That could very well be. This one, as I've said about some other ones in the past, it's going to be a Bloodline match, right? So it's going to feel very Attitude Era, where this guy's going to run in, and this guy's going to run in, and this guy's going to run in, and this guy's going to run in. But I do think that we get the full-blown heel turn here of Kevin Owens in that. And so maybe, yes, maybe I am overthinking that these guys are going to get the win. I think it's going to be a fun match. I will say that. I am a huge fan of Jacob Fatu. And Solo Sikoa, I still think there is something there. Even though when I was saying before, like going into last year, the ultimate goal of the Bloodline should be Solo being a star, because he just kind of had that aura about him. And then he talked, and that aura kind of went away, and he hasn't carried himself in the same way as the leader. It hasn't really clicked, and I don't know what it is, because I like the suit look with the gloves and all, like the Hitman style, all of that. Not Brett, but like I like that style, and I like his in-ring style. There's just something that's not meshing with me on this whole thing, and so I do think that you still get a good match out of this. But Conrad, maybe you're right. Maybe we do get KO preventing Cody from getting the win here with Roman, and then we get a separate beatdown after. But I do believe, if I am not mistaken, the next one, the next PLE technically is Halloween Havoc. Oh, but then we have Crown Jewel. Sorry, that is coming up on November 2nd. And then after that, it is Survivor Series War Games. So we still have basically 2 months, right? We have a month and a half to build up to War Games in what we are all presuming is going to be the Bloodline Civil War thing, right? We're all assuming that that's probably going to be what that is. And so I do think that this needs to advance a little bit more, and we need to get some of those players involved if we are going to get that. Now, this is where we, as I think an internet wrestling community, can get a little bit off target sometimes, because there is, I think, where we just presume, oh, well, this is the direction they're going to go, so this is obviously how it's going to be. I am saying, hey, we need to get this thing moving if we're going to get this to War Games. Nothing about this has screamed War Games up to this point, aside from one group has 4, right? That's basically it. So I kind of thought this would advance a little bit further by this point, to be perfectly honest with you. But if we are going to get that in motion, kind of has to happen now. So I would imagine we get 1 or 2, either debuts or returns this week, or this weekend here at Bad Blood, for this to be an actual thing and kind of get that rolling a little bit more. So I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be fun, but we will see. Conrad, I think Triple H needs Fatu to turn because of Solo's poor mic work. Yeah, it hasn't been great with what he has been doing in that sense. That has certainly not helped. Fatu, yeah, it does kind of seem now that, like, if Hikuleo comes in and joins them, and there's already been some of those seeds planted that Jacob Fatu could be joining the other side, I think that would be a really interesting kind of whatever. And maybe there's this beatdown, and it's just they throw Fatu to the side and they keep doing it, and then he gets pissed and they all brawl, whatever. But no, Jacob Fatu's a star, I think. Like, you see the stuff he's able to do in the ring, and it's incredible. And the mic work is unique. It can be a little too chaotic at times and a little bit too at times, but it's still good, and it's his character, and you just kind of got to get used to that, I think. But he is so good, and so yes, I do think that Conrad, you have convinced me that I was wrong in just assuming that Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns would end up getting the win in this one. I do think that, I mean, they did play up the Atlanta thing pretty hard, and it's not like this era of WWE to not have the hometown guys win, although I guess like Sammy lost in Montreal and all of that in a bigger spot than this. So we'll see. But I do think you're right. I do think we probably get Bloodline win by way of a bit of a screwy finish. Liv Morgan defending the Women's World Championship against Rhea Ripley with Dominic Mysterio up in a shark cage high above the ring. It's a little bit goofy, but I do think that it is a fun way to kind of neutralize Dominic Mysterio and try to neutralize the Judgment Day a little bit more here in this bout. And I do think that Liv has kind of cooled off a little bit as this feud has kind of gone on. She has kind of faded just a touch more into the background of the Judgment Day stuff. They are certainly trying to put a renewed focus on Judgment Day, but the Rhea story has turned into Rhea and Dom, and it's just kind of gone around Liv. And she cut a very good promo. Was it this Monday where she was talking about how she was the homewrecker and stuff like that? I still think she's really good. And so if you wanted to keep the belt on her, I think you could. But I do think we are at a point now where it's time to give Rhea that championship one more time and let her kind of continue to go with that. But I do think that Liv should stay around like the title picture, or at least high up on the card, because I do think she is very good. And I do think that there is a lot of potential there with Liv Morgan. I just wish they would kind of use it maybe a little bit better in the last couple of weeks. But I do think Rhea gets the win. Singles match, Damian Priest against Finn Balor. Boy, they have been building up Finn for the last little while. And you could definitely see a world where Finn ends up getting the win, pardon the rhyming scheme there, and they continue to try to build him up a little bit more. Damian Priest, I said before, it feels like it has cooled off a little bit. And so I think this will be interesting to see where they kind of view each guy right now. Because it certainly seems, as this whole build has gone on, it went from, like, obviously Priest was the project, he was the champion. Since he lost it, though, like, he has come out and he has kicked everyone's ass. And he has felt like that big guy again. But it hasn't, like I said, it hasn't really clicked. But Finn as the heel and kind of the badass new leader of this group, that's clicked. And so I wonder if there's going to be a bit of a pivot here, and let's lock in Finn as one of the next guys coming up here in terms of being someone who I think can move into Intercontinental title feud with Jey Uso, or into a world championship feud or something along those lines. Like, I think the world of Finn is a performer. So I wonder if there is a bit of a shift there, and maybe Finn gets the win. I still think it'll probably be Damian Priest, just to give him that dub coming off of all the shenanigans and everything that has gone on. And maybe we then start to break off a little bit, maybe, because I think it's gone on a touch too long, but we will certainly see how all that goes. And then it is Nia Jax against Bayley for the WWE Women's Championship. I think we probably get another Tiffy tease, something along those lines, and honestly, you know, this wouldn't be the worst time to do that. The Nia Jax title reign, I think, has clicked, again, maybe a little bit more than I was expecting. I do think that the her and Tiffy thing, they kind of raced through it very quickly. And I think we are now at a point where that break can like, we are obviously baby facing Tiffany. And so maybe they let it breathe for a little bit more. And the cash in happens at Crown Jewel or at a Survivor Series or something along those lines. But I would not be stunned if it happened here. I'm certainly not picking Bayley to win. I think that one has kind of come and gone. I think the main focus now is Tiffany against Nia Jax. You could maybe squeeze out another like Naomi thing in here, but it's been a little bit frustrating, the women's division on SmackDown. Like, it just feels like everyone has kind of stuck for a while, and there hasn't really been anyone really moving up or anything like that. Like, Bayley is just kind of there. Naomi is just kind of there. Tiffany Stratton, I think, has the most upward mobility. I think it does seem like we're trying to babyface her a little bit here in being bullied by Nia Jax. I do wonder how that would work, since she is very good at being naturally unlikable. But I think that something needs to change here quickly, because I think that there needs to be a little bit of life shot into the women's SmackDown division right now. But I think Nia gets the win, and I will say Tiffany doesn't cash in. And then we get to the main event. It is in Hell in a Cell, CM Punk against Drew McIntyre. I think they have built this up great. Obviously, it starts a little bit goofy with the bracelets and all of those things. But I think they did a excellent job of really working in a bit more seriousness. And like it was they were trying to be serious about a bracelet, and then they got rid of it, and then they were just serious about each other. And for both of them to say, like, everyone in my life is telling me don't do Hell in a Cell, and don't you don't have to do this, but I do kind of have to. I think it has A, added real legitimacy to this feud, and B, I think it has added real legitimacy to Hell in a Cell, a gimmick that needed it desperately. So I think they've done an awesome job of making Hell in a Cell feel like this is the be-all, end-all, and this is a thing that changes careers, and is something that, like, you only go in there if you hate this person so much, and you have to do it. So I think that they have done a great job in that. In terms of who wins, you can certainly make a case for CM Punk, obviously, as the big star and all of those things. I kind of think you have to go Drew, right? I would not be surprised if Punk took a bit of time after this particular feud, and then comes back, even in just like a month or so, at Survivor Series, or maybe even in the lead up to the Royal Rumble, or something along those lines. I think Drew is the more long-term play here right now, and so I do think that you go with Drew. The one thing I will kind of pause on is, A, I feel like I've had a lot of heels winning tonight, but also, I don't know what's next for Gunther after a Sami Zayn whatever. Now that, I don't think that the match isn't on Wikipedia, so I don't know if that one is happening at this one, or if they're going to save that for Crown Jewel. And so I guess, like, if you do, like, if Sami wins, then maybe Drew McIntyre is the perfect opponent for a Sami Zayn. Or even if Sami loses, it's the perfect kind of fallback for both Sami and for Drew. Although I do think that this match should be physical enough that both guys take some time away, right? Like, we get a video package of whatever, and they stay in our consciousness by way of video packages, but they should both kind of stay away for a little bit. But I do think that there needs to be maybe a little bit more built up on the babyface side right now on Raw. Because right now, your top babyfaces, you have Sami, who's going for the championship. I think at this point, Braun's a babyface, right? We're asking if dogs are barking in every market that we're in. So he's probably, people get excited when he spears people. That's fun. So I think he's probably that. And then it's Jay. And then I guess Braun Strowman. And you could sell a lot of people on Braun Strowman against Gunther, I guess. But there isn't a whole lot built up as ready-made challengers for Gunther if he does beat Sami Zayn. And so where do you go from there with that, right? And so CM Punk, he's been talking about getting his championship opportunities. Maybe he goes, beats Drew McIntyre in the cell, and all right, there's one more big guy I need to conquer now, and that is Gunther, and you do it that way. I don't think there's a wrong answer here. I think this match is going to be incredible. I do think that it is going to be very violent in terms of WWE. I do think that in terms of what we've seen from AEW, I would probably take the under on 0.5 people lit on fire in this match, or glass used or anything. Although I could see CM Punk being petty enough that there's glass at some point as a bit of a wink and a nod to Jack Perry, and something along those lines. So I could see that happening, but I think this will be a very violent, I do think this will be a very bloody match, and I think it's going to be one that we talk about for a very long time. But I will say Drew McIntyre wins, but you can make a case for CM Punk getting the dud. Wink and a finger. The excellent point, Conrad. Yes, no, a wink and a finger. And I'm sure you can figure out which one that would be. That's an excellent point there, Conrad, who has stuck this one out for a couple of hours, as have a few of you. So thank you guys so much for hanging out today. I would like to do a instant reaction to all of the things we talked about here on Fightin' Friday, coming up on the weekend. But it's your boy's anniversary. So, I will not be doing any of the content creation this weekend. I don't know what I am doing this weekend. I have just been told I am busy. So that is that is the case. So probably the Bad Blood and the UFC 307 recap are going to have to wait until Monday's live stream right back here at 10 o'clock here on twitch.tv/primetime PK. So keep it locked on social media for that, and that sort of stuff, because maybe I'll be able, maybe I can't imagine, but it's, you know what? Yeah, our our anniversary plans is we're going to watch Bad Blood and UFC 307 simultaneously. And boy, you're going to have a great time. So I can't imagine that would be the case. So we will probably wait until Monday for the recaps of all of these things. Also, on Sunday, I am going to be a little bit occupied because that is the first pickup day for the new Sea of Dead orders. Sea of Dead 403.ca. We got this hat. Not that Stampede Wrestling shirt, but there is a Stampede Wrestling shirt with some attitude, if you get what I'm saying, and a Run YYC shirt as well, so you can check that out. And if you get your order in quick, we'll probably be able to get it to you by Sunday, or you'll be able to pick it up here on Sunday. So that's what's going on in my world. Yes, Conrad, we got to go prep for something, but that will be announced here in a little bit as well. Thank you, everyone. This is a couple weeks now of doing these live. This has been so much fun to do and to hang out with all of you guys, get the chats going a little bit more. Tell your friends about it. Would like to grow this a little bit more. Not that, Conrad, Deeds, Toxic, you guys being here means the world to me, and I greatly appreciate it. Would like for you guys to be able to interact with more people in here as well, instead of just me talking at you. So it would be fun if we could grow this thing a little bit more. Tell your friends, follow me on social media at Primetime Klein, and I will talk to all of you soon. But also, next week when we're back here streaming at 10 a.m. on twitch.tv/primetimepk. Have a great weekend, everybody.